Since the subclass element Strand was introduced into this game, the community has still been making amazing builds with the subclass, and I'm going to do the same here today. So honestly, enough yapping around, let's get right into it. We're using the Strand subclass with the necrotic grips exotic on Warlock. What this exotic does is called Grasp of the Devourer. Damaging combatants poisons them, dealing increased damage over time. Defeating a poison combatant spreads the condition. And when you're damaging targets, this is from your melee attack. And with the subclass and our arcane needle, which we'll get into very soon, you'll have 3 charges so you can get poisons off 3 times. And with the necrotic grips, there's actually 3 weapons that you can pair together. One being necrochasm, the other one being osteostriga, and the third one being thorn. Those weapons just pair together so you can spread the poison even more, but in this video today, we're not going to be worrying about those weapons paired with this exotic. We're going to be taking a different approach, and I'll explain very soon with the subclass. Speaking of the subclass, let's get into the subclass. We're going to be on the Broodweaver Warlock subclass here today, and we have the Super Needle Storm. Basically, this is kind of like Blade Barrage on Solar Hunter, that sends a swarm of needles to targets, tracking them very aggressively, and when they explode on the target, they'll make threadlings from the explosions, which obviously those threadlings can perch onto you at a total of 5 threadlings on you. But yeah, it's a very good damage super. It can also clear rooms very easily. For our abilities of this build, we're going to be using the Healing Rift as our first ability for the class ability. This will just heal you and your allies constantly when standing in the rift. Next, we have the melee, the arcane needle. This is one of the ways of how we're going to spread this poison, but this melee also unravels targets. And again, we'll have up to 3 charges with this melee. And for our grenade of the subclass, we have the grapple grenade. Basically, this is just for movement, but there's also another aspect of this grapple grenade that you can use with this exotic. Basically, when you grapple, you can push your melee button and you'll do a grapple melee. Once you find a target and you grapple melee them, firstly, the grapple melee just normally unravels targets when you hit them, but also since we're basically meleeing a target, it works with necrotic grips. So we're going to be unraveling the target instantly and also poisoning the target instantly when using this grapple. And there's actually one more aspect we're going to tie right into this that have 3 things going on with this grenade. For the aspects of this build, we're using the mindspun invocation. There's 3 different things that this does to different grenades, but the one we're going to be focusing on the most is the grapple grenade. So that states your grapple melee spawns 3 threadling eggs. So this is going to be the 3rd thing that happens when we do a grapple melee. So again, the first thing will happen, it will unravel a target when we hit a grapple melee. It will poison the target, and also it will throw 3 threadlings at the target, doing a ton of damage from all 3 of those sources. But you might be thinking for higher content, this is not really viable, since you got to get up close and personal with the grapple grenade and the grapple melee. So in that case, with the next aspect, we're going to be using the weave walk. Basically, when you jump in the air and push your dodge or your air move, you'll consume your melee energy, basically just depleting it over time. And since we have 3 melees again, you'll have a decent amount of time within the weave walk. But this will enter your weave. This will give you 90% damage reduction from all combatants and players. And to deactivate the weave walk, you basically just jump in the air again and push your air move again. Or you can cast your rift, or actually this is not stated in here, you can actually do a finisher on a target and it'll get you out of the weave walk. But also while you're in the weave and just running around within your weave, again your melee energy is drained, but it will generate purge threadlings over time. They're going up to 5 threadlings. This is just another source of threadling generation, but this really helps when you're in a bad situation. You can just jump in the air, push your air move, and it'll use your melees, yes, but you will get out of sticky situations very easily. For the fragments of this build, we have Thread of Evolution. Threadlings travel farther and deal additional damage. So this will tie into both our aspects, the mindspun invocation and the weave walk. For our second fragment, we have Thread of Fury. Damaging targets with a tangle grants melee energy. Since you want to have that melee constantly with this build, whenever you create a tangle, you just throw a tangle at an enemy and it'll give you more melee energy. For our third and final fragment, we have Thread of Generation. Dealing damage generates grenade energy. We're going to be doing a ton of damage from our poison to our threadlings to even our unravel. So this will give your grenade energy very fast for more grapples. So then more threadlings, more poison, and more unraveling. Now that we've gone through the subclass, let's go into the mods to enhance this build even more. Here are the full mods of this build. For the helmet, we have Heavy Ammo Finder. This increases the drop chance of a heavy ammo brick on a kill. So this will just give you more ammo for your heavy weapon. For our next mod, we have Hands On. Gain bonus super energy on melee kills. With this build, we're focusing on just our melee in general with the necrotic grips. So we're going to be getting more super energy on every melee kill and also grapple melee, since it also counts as a melee. For our next mod, we have Harmonic Siphon. Rapid stream weapon final blows creates an overpower. So you want to make sure you're using a strand weapon with this build to then generate more orbs for your teammates and also just for you and your armor charges. For our gauntlets of this build, we have Impact Induction. Causing damage with a powered melee attack reduces your grenade cooldown. So obviously with your charged melee, when you use it, you will get more grenade energy. But there's also another secret to this. When you use your grapple grenade and you use your grapple melee, basically again, it counts as a normal melee. So you'll also get more grenade energy from using your grapple grenade. So there's a little infinite loop right there. For our next mod, we have Heavy Handed. Your power melee final blows creates an overpower. There's a 10-second delay on this mod. But every 10 seconds when you get a melee kill, for just your charged melee and also your grapple melee, you will get an overpower, which will again tie into your armor charges and whatever other mods you have that increases your ability regen. For our next mod, we have Focusing Strike. This grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a melee attack. So again, with your charge melee and your grapple melee, you get more healing ref energy, which will help you for more healing for you and your teammates. For the chest piece, we just have Charged Up, just to increase our armor charges stacks by 1, going from 3 to 4, and then whatever resist mods you want. For boots of this build, we have a Strand weapon surge. So you can change this to whatever weapons you're using. Just make sure it matches the elements of what you want it to use. So for me, I'm using a Strand grenade launcher, so I'm using the Strand weapon surge. And with that, I can use like Quicksilver Storm to give me a 10% damage for both my kinetic slot and my heavy slot. For the other two mods of this build, I just have Invigoration, which reduces the melee cooldown each time you pick up an overpower. So from our Heavy Handed and also the Harmonic Siphon, we're going to be getting more melee energy from those mods. And also we just have Recuperation for more health when you pick up an overpower from those two other mods we just mentioned. For the class item, we have Outreach. Reduces your melee cooldown when using your class ability. So every time we use our Healing Rift, you'll get more melee energy. For our next mod, we have Powerful Attraction. This automatically collects orbs of power around you when you activate your class ability. So this just helps when you're in a sticky situation. There's like a ton of orbs around you. You need melee energy right away to get your Weave Walk. You just pop your class ability, it'll pick up all the orbs around you, give you a ton of melee energy and also health from recuperation, and then you can use your Weave Walk to get out of this situation. And for our last mod, we have Time Dilation. Your decaying armor charge stacks has a longer duration, so going from 10 seconds to 15 seconds. This can be switched out to like Reaper if you want to for another source of orb generation, but I just think that extra 5 seconds really helps to keep up your armor charges. And also the 10% bonus to your weapon searches. For the stats of this build, basically you want to build into resilience first for that 30% damage reduction, like always. Next, in my opinion, you want to equal discipline and strength. For me, I have 70-70, which is a good split for me, but try and split it as much as possible for you, because you want that grapple melee and also just your charge melee. If you can't split it, you would probably prioritize melee first, just for more Weave Walk. And since we have Thread of Generation, you can basically get more good energy from just damaging targets. And lastly, if you can, build it into Recovery. This will help just give your Healing Rift back when you need it when you're about to die. For the weapons of this build, you can use the corrupted weapons if you want to tie into your necrotic grips, but in my opinion, especially this season, a Strand weapon is definitely more beneficial to use for more damage and more ad clear in general, just from our artifact mods, which we'll talk about very soon. But my favorite weapon with this build is actually Quicksilver Storm. It just fits perfectly and allows you to create tangles with its catalyst when using the grenade launcher form. Another weapon that's really good within the season is the new Wishkeeper bow. This upcoming week will actually allow you to put hatchling on it for more threadlings, so that's going to be very good. And then for a heavy slot, I like to use the Corax's Distress. I think I'm saying that right. It's from the Root of Nightmares raid. I don't have it crafted yet. I need one more red border, but I'm probably going to put Envious Assassin and Surround it on it to get the max DPS. Another one is actually from Trials. It's called Cataphract GL3. You can get this adept if you go Flawless, but the god build for that is Envious Assassin and Bait and Switch, both with spike nades obviously. There's also a lot of other Strand weapons you can use for the heavy weapon, but those are just my favorites for this build. You can use any special weapon you want, or you can use another primary for champions. Also, Indebted Kindness actually feels really good, not just with this build, but just in general. So I do recommend that. This is from the new dungeon that came out this season. So then that takes us into the artifact. There's only two I really want to talk about. It's Unraveling Orbs and Horde Shuttle. Unraveling Orbs basically gives us unraveling rounds when you pick up an orb of power. There's two ways we're going to make orbs of power with this build, which are going to be pretty often. So we basically have unlimited unraveling rounds. For the next artifact mod, we have Horde Shuttle, like I just mentioned. Damaging unraveled targets with the weapon occasionally spawns a threadling. And when it says occasionally, it means constant. It's actually constant. It's actually insane how many threadlings you can make from this artifact perk. But yeah, pairing these two together is very nice because basically when you pick up an orb, you'll get unraveling rounds, so you damage targets with your weapon, which will then spawn a ton of threadlings just by hitting that target with the unravel. And since we're going to be using the grapple melee, which will unravel, and also your normal charge melee will unravel, you're basically going to be spawning threadlings everywhere. That leads us right into the gameplay loop. I kind of already went over it, but let's go over the bases again. So for your grenade, this will be your grapple grenade and will allow you to use it for movement. But when you're in enemy territory and you're fighting enemies constantly, you want to grapple them, wait a few seconds, then use your melee button to grapple melee. This will track onto targets when you're near them. It'll do three main things like we mentioned. First, it'll unravel targets just from the grapple grenade melee, then it will poison targets from necrotic grips, and then it will send 3 threadlings out from our mindspun invocation aspect, which will do 30% more damage, by the way, from Thread of Evolution. I didn't really mention this earlier in the video, but when you poison a target when they're unraveled, it'll basically tick them constantly, and since you need to damage a target when they're unraveled, to get their unraveling to do even more damage to them, you need to keep constantly hitting them. So this poison will actually proc that unravel to keep hitting them over and over and over again, doing basically double the damage. And if you didn't know, obviously that's called dot damage in Destiny. So going back from those 3 things, you're going to be doing a ton of damage. From the unravel, the poison, and the threadlings doing extra damage. And when that one target dies, it will spread the poison to other enemies and also unravel to other enemies, so doing a ton of damage to everything around you. And also you generate more grenade energy from thread generation. This grapple melee will also proc impact induction, which will basically put right back into your grenade. It will also proc heavy-handed for an orb of power, and then class ability energy from focus and strike. You will also get more super energy on melee kills from hands-on. So let's talk about your real charge melee, the arcane needle. Again, you'll have 3 charges, and when you use it, it will track onto enemies, unraveling them. This will proc necrotic grips for more poison, but we're not going to be exactly using it just for that case. We're going to be using it for weave walk. This is our aspect, which will basically turn us invisible to targets and give us a 90% damage reduction. So if you use your grapple grenade and you use the grapple melee on a target and you're about to die because you're in harder content, you could just jump in the air real quick, push your air move, go and weave walk, and then run away from that area. And when you're doing that, it will deplete your melee energy. But again, you have 3, so it's going to take a little bit. But then when you're doing that, it will perch 5 threadlings on you. And to get out of it, you can either finish an enemy, use a healing rift, or just jump in the air again, use your air move, and it'll get you out of the weave walk. But with that, in our charge melee, we're going to be generating more energy for it from a thread of fury, which when you pick up a tangle and throw at an enemy, you'll get more melee energy. And also your charge melee can do the 4 things that your grapple melee can do, since they're both considered melees. It'll give you the impact induction, the heavy-handed, the focus and strike, and hands-on. Let's talk about your class ability. This is your healing rift. Basically when you use it, you will get more melee energy from outreach. You can pick up all the orbs around you when using your class ability from powerful attraction. These will just help get your melee back faster, for more weave walk, and also for more weapon surges. Speaking of weapon surges, let's get into the armor charges. We're going to be using the Strand weapon surge, but you can use any surge you want. Just make sure it matches your weapons. But when you pick up an orb power, you'll get a 10% bonus to that weapon. You'll get more melee energy from invigoration, more healing from recuperation, and obviously just more super in general by just picking up an orb. Alright, so let's go over the full thing after recapping everything. Basically, when you use your grapple grenade to get the grapple melee, to spawn 3 threadlings, unravel targets, and also poison them. You can use your charge melees as you want, but mostly you want to save those for weave walk when you need it. When you unravel targets, you want to damage with your weapons. This being Strand weapons in my opinion. And also when you pick up orbs, you'll unravel targets from unraveling rounds. Both these is from the artifact this season, unraveling orbs and horde shuttle. This build also just works great without them, so you don't really need them. Obviously this season is going to be very powerful. But basically after using your grapple melee, you want to jump in the air and use a weave walk if you are in a sticky situation. If you're not getting bombarded, you don't need to. But in harder content, you will get bombarded since you're going to be close and personal with the enemies. But again, this weave walk will turn you invisible. It will perch 5 threadlings on you, give you a 90% damage reduction while in the weave. You're going to begin your grenade very fast with everything that's going to be ticking and also just doing damage in general. And also lastly, just make sure you're picking up all those orbs for your super and for your armor charges and for your ability regen. But that's basically it for the build. If you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you a lot. Maybe even consider subscribing and leaving a like if you guys enjoyed this build. I have some fun builds and good builds for harder content on my channel, so if you're interested, make sure to check that out. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.
AKZ, you crazy?